Good morning, everybody. It was just before we stopped worshiping in person that I preached a sermon about spring. Today is the first full day of summer. It's only 3 months, but it seems a lot longer than that. As I look back in the last 3 months, I'm asking myself, how did I get through this season? You might be asking yourself the same thing. How did we get through this season? One way I got through the season was by walking more than I have since I was a teenager. I'd walk down to the ocean, up to the train station and back. I even one day walked up to Sunrise Highway and back. And as I walked through the season, I saw the leaves starting to grow on the trees. I saw the flowers starting to bloom. I saw the birds starting to return. I'd feel the water every few days to see how it was warming up. And as I'd watch the waves roll in from the dock, I'd think to myself, this is my Father's world. When we're inside for too long, we begin to rely on man-made things for entertainment. And if we're not careful, we begin to rely on them for spiritual sustenance as well. And if they don't uplift us, we think there's something wrong with that or something wrong with us. But there's only so much a TV can do, or a book, or music. As wonderful as these things can be, we can connect them to God because God made the people who made the TV, who made the music, who made the book. Or we can eliminate the middleman and go directly to God, the creator of all good things, and see what God has been creating directly. The coolness of the air in early morning, a field of flowers at the Arboretum, hidden lakes at the San Souci Park, baby squirrels on the church lawn, a torrential downpour, a sizzling sun. In the words of all things bright and beautiful, God has made all things well, and he's made them for our enjoyment, for our nourishment, and for our joy. When reading the Bible seems like just words, it's time to get outside to see what the Bible is written about. This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature rings, and round me rings the music of the spheres. How did we get through this season? According to 2 separate surveys, a quarter of all Americans say that their faith grew stronger during the pandemic, and only 2% say that it grew weaker. We turn more to God in hard times than in good. We're more likely to pray longer and more fervently when we are in need than when we're doing well. There's been so much to pray for lately, more than we can comprehend or handle. Back in March, we started praying for our health and the health of others. The last Sunday that we were together in worship, Tanai and I were demonstrating how to pass the peace in a fun, non-contact manner. But 1 week later, all the churches were closed, and we didn't even get to practice it. At first, we thought we'd be closed for 2 weeks, then a month, then a couple months, and then it became an entire season. Then we started praying for people around us who were sick. Some got better, and some didn't. And then we started praying for the loved ones of those who had died. And it wasn't just that they died, but that they died often alone. And their funerals were delayed. We experienced types of suffering that we had never experienced before. We realized the burden it was putting on our healthcare workers and our essential teachers, so we started praying for them as well. Then we saw the massive unemployment numbers come in, and the bankruptcies, and the pandemic divorces, and the pervasive economic despair. Then George Floyd was killed, so we marched, and then more Black people were killed, and we kept marching. We began to pray for the soul of our nation, and then this week, the pandemic numbers started to go back up. How did we get through all this? All this packed into one small season. How are we getting through this today? How will we get through this? The answer is found in the story Footprints. When Jesus says to the man on the beach, I carried you. And the origins of footprints are found in the book of Deuteronomy. As Moses writes, you saw how the Lord your God carried you, as a father carries his son, all the way until you reached this place. This is our good, good Father. Our Heavenly Father picked us up at the end of winter, carried us through the spring, and deposited us on the shores of summer. Throughout history, God has carried his people when they couldn't walk on their own, through deserts physical and metaphorical, through long nights and fierce storms, through famines and depressions, through pandemics and world wars. We are not strong enough to handle things on our own. There's just too much for us to bear. Health surveys bear this out. Half of all Americans have felt down, depressed, or hopeless in the last 3 months, and 1/3 are clinically anxious or depressed. But when we admit that they're weak, when we turn to our good, good Father for help, we can become strong because we no longer rely on our own strength. As Paul writes, I can endure all conditions through Christ who strengthens me. Here's some more good news. When we turn to God, God doesn't just turn to us. When we draw near to God, God doesn't just draw near to us. When we simply turn to God, God runs to us. We find this image in the story of the prodigal son. The son had just spent all his father's inheritance on wine and women, and was so depressed he was envying the pig pods. He decided he would go home and beg his father to let him work as a slave. But he didn't even have a chance to give his speech when he saw his good, good father running across the fields to him, calling out his name, holding out his hands, embracing him. No questions asked, no accusations, only love. So how can we be good, good fathers? I have 4 simple suggestions. Number 1, God has surrounded us with an amazing, beautiful world, and God always hopes that we'll notice it. A good, good father tries to point out the goodness in life, to highlight everything that is positive and encouraging, especially in hard times. And we too can highlight these things, such as the people outside hospitals, still banging pots and pans at 7 o'clock when the shifts change. The rainbows in windows, the lawn displays celebrating graduations and birthdays, the cookies baked, the meals delivered, and the beauty of creation itself. Number 2, we can teach our children, our loved ones, our friends, that it is okay to cry. It's okay to be weak sometimes. It's okay not to be able to do it all. It's okay to let others in. It's okay to ask for help. We all need to be carried sometimes. Number 3, when our children want to come to us, to hang out with us, to play with us, we can respond with joy. When we're stressed, it can seem like a task or a burden or a distraction. But remember how the father of the prodigal son dropped everything to run to his son. He was so filled with joy just to see him. And what a blessing it is to have children who love us. One of the greatest blessings our Father ever created. And finally, number 4, even when our children do ridiculous, stupid, reckless things, and we have to be the tough parent, may we always be guided by love, only love. If we do this, we may be able to bring our children to an even greater love, the love of the one who will bring them through every crisis, even when we're not around. Chris Tomlin sings, I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whispers of love in the dead of night. And you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good Father. That's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. Happy Father's Day.